But this particular shir, I actually started out as a conversation with her. And she always asks me, every year she says, "Oh, when are you giving that end of day shir?" It could be it's her favorite, it could be it's the only one she remembers. In any event, I remember 2 years ago, this was the first time I gave this shir in the yeshiva. Zalman was visiting that night. Have you heard this shir before?
Probably, but I don't remember.
2 years ago, which was the first time that I gave this shir in the yeshiva, when I announced it after Ma'ariv, someone came over to me and said, "Aren't you not allowed to calculate the end of days?" Now, raise your hand if you've ever heard that you're not allowed to calculate the end of days. So the first thing we have to deal with is the fact that a bunch of you believe that you're not allowed to calculate the end of days. So the Ramban's going to play a very important role in this shir. You guys have heard of the Ramban, or Moshe ben Nachman, Nachmanides, whatever you want to call him. He lived in the 13th century. The Ramban, among his many works... Yo, could you close that window? Among the Ramban's many works, he wrote a book called Sefer HaGeula, the Book of Geula. And here we go. He wrote a book called Sefer HaGeula. We'll talk more about why he wrote this book in a little bit, but the book has 4 sections to it. A lot of the book talks about the history of the 2 previous Geulas, the Geula of Yetziat Mitzrayim and the Geula leaving Bavel. And then, towards the end of the book, he starts to talk about the current Galut that we're in. And at the very end of the book, he does a calculation of when Mashiach is going to come. There's this whole numerical thing, this whole calculation of different years, and he tries to figure out when Mashiach's going to come. Right before he does that calculation, right before the end of the book, he states as follows. Listen carefully. Before I open my mouth to talk about the end of days, because I'm about to do a calculation. So before I get into that, it says the first thing we have to do before we go ahead and talk about when, calculating when Mashiach is going to come, is we have to apologize, is the term he uses, but basically deal with the fact that the Chachamim, Chazal said in Masechet Sanhedrin, Tepach ruchan shel mechashvei kitzin, which means the spirit of those who calculate the end of days, tepach, it should blow up. It should be blown away. It's very hard to translate it. Tepach ruchan shel mechashvei kitzin. Adam Freeman's etymology brain is working trying to figure out what the word tepach means. Right? Taf peichet. I'm not sure how to translate it. It's a funny word that the Gemara uses. Now that is the source. That line in the Gemara is the source for this idea that a lot of you guys have in your heads that you're not supposed to do this. The Gemara never says you're not supposed to do it. It just says people who do it should basically shut up. Bad idea. They should go away. They should keep their mouths shut. Okay? We'll continue with the Ramban for a little bit, and then we're going to look in the Gemara at that source, and then we'll go deeper. Va'omar, and I will say, Ki hakavana b'zeh mima she'amarnu, ki mehem zichronam livracha, sheyodim arichut haketz achareihem. Says the intention of this, of what has been said, is that there were rabbis. Listen carefully. This is very, very big stuff. You listening, Shimshon? There were among the rabbis those who knew that the exile was going to be very, very long. They knew it. They knew we were headed for a deep, long exile. That it wasn't going to be like Bavel 70 years. K'moshe amru Rabbi Akiva, as people said to Rabbi Akiva, Ya'alu asabim ala chayayich v'adayin ben David Eroba. grass is going to be growing out of your palate, and Mashiach still won't have come. Basically, like they basically said to Rabbi Akiva, you're going to be pushing up daisies. It's going to be a while. Ve'inam rotzim, we'll talk about that some other time. Ve'inam rotzim she'itgaleh hadavar. The only questions that are fair game in this year, because otherwise we'll be here all night, the only questions that are fair game are if you did not understand something that I said. Okay? Because otherwise we'll be here all night. There's lots of room for your mind to wander and think about other questions. Okay? But it's not because it's not a good question. Okay? It's not because it's not a good question. It's because it'll take us far afield. It'll take too long. Okay? Does everyone understand that? I'm not being rude and I'm not saying it's not a question. We just can't. I don't want to get sidetracked. Okay? There's enough material here without that. So please only ask a question, and you can interrupt me to ask a question. If I said something that's not clear to you, you don't understand what I was talking about, that you can ask. Okay? We cool? You got that? Everyone's fine? Okay. So now, they knew basically what the Ramban has said so far is when the Chachamim said you're not supposed to calculate the end of days, they had in mind the following. There were people who knew it was going to be a very long galut. But they did not want to publicize that fact to the populace. They didn't want to tell people it's going to be a couple thousand years away. Because what will happen is it will cause people to lose faith. If you tell people who are heading into suffering, the redemption ain't coming in your lifetime or your grandkids or your great-grandkids, it's going to be a couple thousand years away, it's going to be very difficult for them to stick it out. We'll get to this more later. Now the Ramban says now, in the 13th century, these reasons don't apply anymore. Because we, and the Ramban's writing this 700 or so years ago, more, almost 800, 750 years ago, the Ramban's writing, because these ta'anot don't apply, these claims that people are going to lose faith because the exile is so long don't apply anymore. You know why? Anachnu ba'acharit hayamim, because we are now at the end of days. Was he wrong? Looks like it. All right. And furthermore, there are already others from the world of our Torah, from men of our Torah who have written books about this, making calculations about the end of days. Rashi did it. Ibn Ezra did it. Rasaji Gaon did it before the Ramban. Many people after the Ramban also did it. So Rashi and Daniel. And therefore there's nothing to lose by me also throwing my hat into the ring and telling you what I think is the calculation of when Mashiach's going to come. Perhaps, from my telling my calculation about the end of days, there will be an additional good and comfort to people. Because what I'm going to say is going to make sense. And this is it's going to make sense to people. Now listen to what the Ramban is saying. If you didn't want to listen to me translating words, listen, focus in here. The Ramban says that people in the time of the Beit HaMikdash, it was so far away that if you told people we're just at the beginning of this long exile, imagine someone suffering. Oh, how long is this going to last? You say, what are you talking about, man? You just started. You got a lot of suffering ahead of you. The person's not going to be able to handle it. So he says we didn't want, when the Chachamim said it's a bad idea to talk about the end, it says because they knew it was going to be long, they said don't talk to people about how long it is. Don't tell them when it's actually going to be. It's too far away. They're going to lose faith. But says the Ramban, it's now, when I'm writing, says the Ramban, it's now 1,200 years later. Now it actually be a good thing to talk about it, because now it has been a long time, and people are sitting in the exile, and it's terrible, and Jews are losing faith because it looks endless. So now the best thing we can do is say to people, the worst is over. It's on the way. And it's not going to cause them to lose faith. That's what would have happened 1,000 years ago. Now it's going to actually cause them to gain faith. So the reasoning the Chachamim gave is reversed. Because now we're at the end of days already. It's almost over, says the Ramban, in the year 1260 or so. It's almost over. Now, he says the rabbis gave a reason. The Chachamim gave a reason. It's not just a line that says people should shut up. It says why they should shut up. The line in the Gemara says as follows. Teipach atzman shemachashvei kitzin. Why? Shehayu omrim. Kevan shehigia aketz v'lo ba, shuvei no ba. The reason given in the Gemara for why you're not supposed to calculate the end of days is that people are going to get excited about the date that you came up with. They're going to believe. Excuse me. They're going to believe you. The date's going to pass, and if Mashiach doesn't come on that date, for whatever reason he doesn't come on that date, people are going to lose faith. What if the person who calculated was wrong? I remember when I was a kid. It was in the late 1970s. There was all this excitement in the yeshivish world because some date was coming up, like some year was coming. I don't remember what year it was, 78, 1978, 79, somewhere around there. I was a kid, 80. It was 50 years since the Chafetz Chaim had said Mashiach's going to come in 50 years. The Chafetz Chaim had made some statement about how in 50 years Mashiach will be. Some statement he made. Now, Chafetz Chaim died in 1933. I don't know exactly when he made the statement. I don't remember what year it was when I was a kid and everyone got excited. But I remember like my teacher in school and people getting all excited, like, the 50-year mark since the Chafetz Chaim said that is coming. It came and it passed. And people sort of shrug their shoulders and move on. But you could imagine a person getting so wrapped up that the Chafetz Chaim said it and putting all his stock in it, and then when that date comes and it's not Mashiach, they freak out. So the Chachamim said, don't start talking about dates because you might end up being wrong. That piece of Gemara is then followed by a couple pages talking about Mashiach and when Mashiach's going to come. And all sorts of strange references and disputes in the Gemara that seem to be vague. And one of the main discussions following that piece of Gemara is, are there ways to make the Geula come faster and other ways to delay it? In other words, when people make all sorts of different calculations, every one of those calculations is a possible date. It's a possible date. Most of the calculations of when Mashiach is going to come, including his here, are based on a pasuk in Daniel. There's a pasuk in Daniel that has some weird numbers about how long the exile is going to be. And the Navi Daniel, who's told this prophecy by a malach, says to the malach, I don't understand what I'm seeing. And the malach says to him, when the time comes, it'll become clear. People then started interpreting this pasuk to try to come up with all sorts of different dates. The Ibn Ezra, in response to the Reb Sadia Gaon's attempt to interpret these psukim, says, I don't get it. The Navi Daniel didn't know what his nevuah meant, and Sadia Gaon knows what it means. Right? But then he tries to make a calculation. Now, later on, after the Ramban, the Malbim made a calculation, the Arizal made a calculation, the Vilna Gaon made a calculation. Everyone's been making calculations about the end of dates. And we'll see a recent one soon. I once heard a shir from Rav Avigdor Nebenzahl Shlita. He's the chief rabbi of the Old City. He was the main student. For 40 years he was a student and chavrusa of Rav Shlomo Zalman Arba. And I once heard a shir that he gave at Yeshivat HaKotel on a Friday afternoon. He's not a Rebbe Yeshivat HaKotel, he lives in the Old City, but every Friday afternoon, right before Shabbos, he goes into the Beis Medrash in Yeshivat HaKotel and gives a shir to whoever's there. And I happened to be there. I didn't even know what was happening. I happened to be in the Beis Medrash Yeshivat HaKotel. It was that Shabbos year one when we went to the Old City for Shabbos.
Oh yeah.
So Rav Nebenzahl, Zalman was in the yeshiva its first year. He's married now. So Rav Nebenzahl said something interesting. He was talking about the building of the Beit HaMikdash. That was what the shir was about. And in the middle of the shir, he said something really interesting. He said, there's all these different calculations. And he mentioned the Ibn Ezra's question of Rasadia Gaon. How could it be that the Navi didn't know, but all these Mefarshim come around and they say, oh, I figured out the Nevuah, I figured out the Nevuah, I figured out the Nevuah. The Navi says he doesn't know what his Nevuah means. So Rav Nebenzahl said, the Navi looked at his Nevuah and said, there's a lot of different ways to interpret this Nevuah. I don't know which is the right interpretation.
That was your sleeping bag.
And the Malach says back to him, of course you don't. It's going to become clear when it happens. Meaning that all of the different ways to interpret when the end of days is going to be are all basically telling you that these are possibilities of when it could happen. Windows, openings, windows of opportunity for it to happen. And if one of them passes and it doesn't happen, okay, that one didn't happen. But it could have. Okay? So, that's going to be our backdrop for this whole discussion today. Meaning, when we talk about when Mashiach is going to come, or calculations of when Mashiach is going to come, it's all calculating what the next or a possible time for Mashiach coming is. Okay? And as the Ramban then says later on in this piece, he says, Dvareinu bekates divrei shema ve'efshar. Everything we're saying about the end of days are words of perhaps and maybe. Meaning, don't hold me to this. Don't lose faith if it doesn't come true. What I'm saying is maybe. I'm going to do a calculation. I'll do my best to figure out when Mashiach's going to come. I'll do my best. And if it doesn't happen, so chill out. You know, divrei shema ve'efshar. This is a maybe. Okay. Now let's get into the Gemara. The Gemara in Sanhedrin. Now, another thing we've been taught as we were taught this as kids is that, like, keep your bags packed because tomorrow morning you could wake up and boom, Mashiach's going to come and we're all going to fly to Israel, and like it can happen at any moment, right? Afal pi shehit mameh. I'll together now. Im kol zeh achakelo b'chol yom she'yavo. Right? We're all taught this as kids. Mashiach can come at any moment. Is that rational? No. In fact, the Rambam, who that principle of faith is based on, never actually said that. If you look in the essay you guys read in the philosophy course, the 13 principles, look at the text of the 12th principle of Mashiach coming, he never says he can come on any single day. He says you have to believe that eventually he'll come. The guy who wrote the Animamins is not the Rambam. Someone took the Rambam's essay and adapted it and made this list of Animamins, and the guy changed a few of them, messed them up. And one of these things that he did was he stuck this idea into Judaism for all time that Mashiach can come at any moment. Okay? There's no necessity for you to believe that Mashiach can come at any moment. Now, where does that really come from, the idea that Mashiach can come at any moment? It doesn't come from the Rambam or from the guy who made the Animamins, really. It comes from a much earlier source. There's a machloket in the Gemara, in Masechet Sanhedrin, right after that statement, Tepach atzman shel mechashvei kitzim, right after that, a machloket begins, a fascinating machloket. The machloket is between Rabbi Eliezer, who argues with Rabbi Eliezer all the time in the Gemara, Rabbi Eliezer or Mishnayos, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yochanan's an Amora, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua. They argue all the time. Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua. It's good to remember Bar Pluktas. Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua have the following dispute. Rabbi Eliezer holds that the Jewish people have to do tshuva for Mashiach to come. Raise your hand if you've heard this idea before, that Mashiach will come when the Jewish people do tshuva. Okay, we've all heard this idea. Great, that's Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. Rabbi Yeshua holds, right, keeping Shabbos, all these things, just one Shabbos and we'll all be free. Right? It's an old song. Rabbi Yeshua holds, no. Rabbi Yeshua holds that even if they don't do tshuva, Mashiach's still going to come and then they'll do tshuva afterwards. Okay? Machlokas. And then they start bringing psukim back and forth. This one's bringing a pasuk that says we have to do tshuva. This one's bringing a pasuk that says no. And the psukim about how we have to do tshuva are also psukim that allude to a miraculous redemption process. And the psukim about us not doing tshuva seem to be a more natural redemption process. And they go back and forth arguing. Now, there's a lot of disputes in the Gemara that are not resolved, especially when they're not halachic. This one actually is. How do you think we pass?
Both?
No. At the end of the discussion, it says, V'shatak Rabbi Eliezer. After Rabbi Yeshua makes one of his points, it says Rabbi Eliezer was silent. And that's the end of the discussion. Then it starts talking about a sign that the redemption is coming, which I'll share with you in a moment. Rabbi Eliezer submits. Now that's interesting, because that means that in this dispute, the side that was arguing that the Jewish people have to do tshuva before Mashiach comes, admitted defeat. he backed off. Which means that the prevailing position in the Gemara is that the Jewish people do not have to do tshuva in order for Mashiach to come. Why were we all raised? Why did our Rebbeim in school teach us that we have to do tshuva for Mashiach to come? So there's an easy one.
It's easier to get us to do stuff.
What? It's easier to get us to do stuff. They wanted us to do tshuva. If they said to us, it doesn't matter what you do, Mashiach's coming anyway, how are they going to get you to come to class and pay attention and keep your tzitzis on daven mincha? So they told us, but there's other reasons also why they told us that. But this is very important. It's very important. Next time you're having one of your disputes with your Haredi friends, and they say, "Well, how can it be the beginning of the redemption? The Jewish people haven't done tshuva." I say, Rabbi Eliezer lost. Rabbi Eliezer himself admits defeat. He backs off. Shatak, Rabbi Eliezer. He submitted. The Jewish people do not have to do tshuva for Mashiach to come. That's the prevailing position. Okay? In the Gemara. Now, this whole thing then leads into a discussion of a pasuk. Basically, there's like 3 pages in Sanhedrin that are just devoted to Mashiach stuff. And we're skipping around it. There is a pasuk in Yeshaya, in Sefer Yeshaya, which is the source of a lot of the discussion about how Mashiach's going to come. In religious Zionist writing, there's a lot written about this pasuk, and in the Gemara, they discuss it. The pasuk is, you might have heard the phrase before, Ani Hashem bi'ita achishen. Okay, I am God. In its time, I will hasten it. Hasten meaning to bring it quickly, to rush it. The problem with the pasuk, right here in the Gemara, that pasuk is brought up, and the question is asked about it. It says, Rabbi Shua ben Levi Rami Ktiv. Rabbi Shua ben Levi brought a contradiction between 2 psukim, but it's not 2 psukim, it's the same pasuk. He brought an internal contradiction of pasuk. You can't say about something that it will be rushed in its time. Because there's 3 ways something can come. It can come on time, it can come rushed, meaning hastened, it can come early, right? That's early, or it can come late. You can't say, I'm going to hasten it and bring it, it's going to be hastened on time, but at the right time. So there's a problem with the pasuk. What does that mean? So the Gemara concludes that there's 2 possible ways the Geula can come. It can either come bi'ita, on time, or it can come achishena, rushed. And it says, zachu, if the Jewish people are meritorious. If they all do tshuva, yeah, the Geula can get rushed. It can come early. But if not, it's going to come in its time. Okay? Meaning Rabbi Eliezer's position that the Jewish people have to do tshuva, he holds that there is no option of bi'ita. There's only the option of achishen. There's only the option of the Jewish people doing tshuva, Mashiach coming. But later on in the Gemara it says there's really 2 possible ways Mashiach can come. If we all do tshuva, hayom b'kolot tishma'u. Even today Mashiach can come. If everyone does tshuva. So yes, what we were taught in grade school is correct. We should come in any day, provided that all of Klal Yisrael does tshuva. And until you see that happening, it's an irrational belief. Okay? So, let's focus. Bi'ita achishena, 2 possible geulas. Geula bi'ita, in its time, means it happens naturally. It means the Jewish people don't necessarily do tshuva. It happens at the time that God provided for it. And it's a kind of natural redemption process. Geula achishena, the rushed geula, means that everyone did tshuva, everyone rose to a high spiritual level, and all sorts of miraculous things happen. Shuls flying through the air, and Mashiach comes. Okay, and Mashiach comes. That's the rushed one. Those are the 2 options for the geula coming, and we also have lurking in the background the fact that Rabbi Eliezer lost the argument. And there's no necessity for the Jewish people to do tshuva. So that opened the door for this. Now, the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, Rabbi Chaim Ben Attar, great Kabbalist and commentator on the Torah, in his Perush to Parshat Balak, and the whole thing with Bilam, blessing / cursing, whatever you want to call it, the Jewish people, Daled Yud Zion, discusses this in detail. Don't worry, we'll get to the cool calculations. That's the candy at the end of the shit. Stay awake, you get to it. Okay? The Orach Chaim says as follows. Here we go.
That's why it says
you see the Shabbat is a combination.
The Orach Chaim, here's this long piece. I'm not going to read you the whole piece. He talks about the two options, that the Gula Achishena, the Gula Bi'ita, and he says, let me find it. Here we go.
how to reconcile Torah.
Think of the line I'm looking for. Here we go. That's my problem. There's one line I'm looking. Here we go. Well, Keneged Geulat Bi'ita. I'm just going to read you two lines out of a very long piece by the Orach Chaim. So we don't have time for the whole thing. But he discusses this whole idea of these two. That's where he lays out what I've just said. He cleans up a lot of the kind of cryptic nature of the Gemaras in Sanhedrin, and he puts it into two options for how the Mashiach comes. Okay? Don't get distracted. This is what he says. Keneged Geulat Bi'ita, regarding the Geula in its time, Amar, it says, V'kam shevet miYisrael. That's what the pasuk, in the pasuk that Bilam says, V'kam shevet miYisrael. The leadership, the staff of kingship will arise in Israel. That's referring to the Geula in its time, the non-tshuva one. Kederech, I'm sorry, here we go. Perush, what does this mean? Sheyakum shevet achad miYisrael, that one staff of Israel will arise. Kederech hakamim ba'olam derech hateva. Like arising in the world naturally. Meaning, he says that in the process of Geula that is in its time, the Jewish people don't do tshuva before it, and they arise in the world the way nations arise in the world naturally. They go through the natural process. Wars, UN votes, immigration laws, they movements that function naturally. And they go through the work of putting together a country in a natural way. That is what he says. Okay. Now, Rashi in Sanhedrin, there's a famous Gemara that says that the world will exist for 6,000 years. Raise your hand if you've heard the idea, the world 6,000 years? Popular idea. Well, that's a Gemara right here. And the opinion in the Gemara, the person who said it, is Eliyahu. Tanad Eliyahu. Sheishet alafim shana havi alma. The world is 6,000 years. Shnei alafim tohu, 2,000 years of chaos. Shnei alafim Torah, 2,000 years of Torah. Shnei alafim yemot Mashiach, 2,000 years of the days of Mashiach. That's weird, huh? 2,000 years of chaos, 2,000 years of Torah, 2,000 years of Mashiach. Okay, Rashi now sorts through this. He says, what does this mean? He says the 2,000 years of chaos. I'm not going to read you the words of Rashi. I'm looking at the Rashi. I'm just going to say it in English as I read it. He says, before the Torah was given, the world was chaotic. So what's the 2,000 years of chaos? From the creation until Avram was 52 years old. Avram was born in the year 1948. The original 1948 was when Avram was born, which means that the year 2000 on the Jewish calendar was when Avram's 52 years old. Great. Now, I want to put something in perspective now about history, because our perspective on history is all messed up. I want you to think about the following. Right now we're in year 5,700. We're about to start. This is the last day of 5,769. Okay? That means, now, if Avram was born in the year 1948, what's 1948 times 3? Less than 6,000. Something, thank you, that's the right answer. But it's not 230 years less than 6,000.
No.
Okay. It's about 150 years less than 6,000. Which means that, understand something, the first two parshas of the Torah encompass more than a third of the total time from creation of the world till right now us sitting here. Let me say that again. The first two parshas in the Torah tell the story from the creation for more than a third of the entire time from then till now. Did everyone get their heads around this? The time periods we tend to think of like, all of a sudden the Torah, that's back then, and then there's the middle part, and then there's now, or whatever that is. Like you think of history, like in a big sweep. Understand something. Is this a little freaky? Am I the only one freaked out by this? Is this freaky?
It actually becomes
a huge. You understand what percentage of human history, according to world's history? Yeah, human history.
If you accept,
Did you understand what I said? Good. So no. This is not a dialogue. Like I said to Akira. Okay. I know you're thinking something cool, but don't share it. Okay. What? I mean, I'm not talking about from the Big Bang. Big Bang is 15 million years ago. I'm talking from the creation of the first human being. Okay? Human civilization. Whatever 6,000 years is. The Bronze Age, whatever it is. But according to our calculations, we have here, it's a shocking thing. From Adam Arishon till Avram is over more than a third of the total time till now. Okay? Now, so that's chaos. Rashi says that that's chaos because the Torah hadn't been given yet. Now, the Torah hadn't been given yet for a little while.
400 years later.
Rashi then says, when those 2,000 years were over, Avram started getting involved in Torah. Teaching people, converting people, etc., etc. Now, let me make this normal here. Avram Avinu starts telling people about God. What's the definition of Torah? Now let's think broadly here. The definition of Torah is God giving his message to a human being to spread to the people. Right? That's what Torah is. Torah is God communicating his message of morality and truth to the world through a prophet. Great. When does that start? Avram Avinu. So Torah, the era of Torah begins. The era of chaos before then, when everyone does whatever they want. That's how long that time was. Okay? Here's another way to look at it. The amount of time from Avram forward, which equals the amount of time from Avram back. You know how far that takes us? You know how far that takes us? It takes us like the times of the Mishnah. So from Avram to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is about the same as from Adam to Avram. That's a lot of stuff that happened in between there. Okay? So now, the era of Torah happens from Avram Avinu until, like I said, until the year 4000. What's the year 4000? Is there one of those Rabbi Carmel books around here? You know, they have a great map in the back. Yeah, here we go. 80 Talmud study. So in 80 Talmud study, we have the date of the publication of the Mishnah, right? The publication of the Mishnah. Where does it happen? I'm sorry, it's the end of the Amoraim. Forget what no. Publication of the Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi lives in 39. See, he's 3950. Where does the Mishnah get published? Does it say the publication of the Mishnah? Chibura Mishnah. Yeah, there it is. Year 4000. Just about. 3950. Yeah, year 4000. Okay? So, the era of Torah happens to correspond precisely with Avram reaching the stage of life where he starts teaching people till the Mishnah is sealed. Torah Shebachtav, Torah Shebal Peh are put out there. That takes 2,000 years. And now, Mashiach, right? 2,000 years of Mashiach. Rashi doesn't deal with those. So he just says, yeah, okay, then 2,000 years. So now what? What's that supposed to mean? Is it 2,000 years of Mashiach? Okay. See? So, guys, the end of the lesson is the Mashiach came around the time of the close of the Mishnah. I hope you're enjoying yourself. No, I'm just kidding. It's not the Okay, Okay, now you can put on your okay, where's the cool stuff I came to the shir about? Why is Rabbi Wolicki's wife so excited? Okay. Listen up. According to the Kabbalistic tradition, these 6,000 years, according to the Zohar and the Gra, develops extensively. The 6,000 years correspond to 6 days. 6 days of creation, 6,000 years. Because based on the pasuk of Tehillim, it says, "Ki elef shanim be'einecha ki yom etmol," that 1,000 years are like a day for God. Everyone heard this idea before? 1,000 years like a day for God? We've heard this idea somewhere along the lines. Okay, now the Gra in a book, the Gra wrote a. Well, he didn't write the sefer. A Talmud of the Gra, Hillel Mishklav, wrote a book called Kol HaTor, which is a book that is the Gra's teachings about the coming of the Mashiach. Okay? That's what the book is, written by a student of the Gra. And in there, it extensively deals with this calculation that each 1,000 years is a day. That means that if you divide each 1,000 years into 24 units, you'll get what corresponds to hours, which makes each hour 41 years and 41 and a 41 years and 3 months. Right, it's 41 years and 3 months. Is that right? 41 and a quarter. Is that correct? Hold on, hang on a second. 2/3? 1/3 and 2/3, or 2/3. It's 41 2/3. 41 years and 8 months then. Right, exactly. 41. Every 41 years and 8 months is a 24th of 1,000. Okay, so every 41 years and 8 months corresponds to an hour. Got that? Now I want to go back to the Ramban for a second. Before we actually get into our modern calculation, let's get back to the Ramban. When the Ramban said we are now in the end of days, let me tell you what the Ramban meant. The Ramban was born in the year. Ramban was born around the year 1200, 1190, I think he was born. What's the year 5000? What's the end of the 5th day, the beginning of the 6th day? The year 1240. The Ramban is already a leader of the Jewish people, and he's planning to go to the land of Israel. Why does the Ramban write Sefer Agula? Because the Ramban looks at the calendar and says, day 5 is over, Erev Shabbos is beginning. We're heading into day 6. Day 6 is Erev Shabbos. It's the last 1,000 years. So now we're in the home stretch. So the Ramban says we're heading, it's it. Now we're almost there. Let's go a little deeper into the Ramban. The Ramban is critical here. The Ramban travels to Israel. He gets to Israel shortly after the Tatars. They were a warring tribe from Asia, swept through parts of Asia and the Middle East. The Tatars invaded Jerusalem, destroyed the walls around the city of Jerusalem, murdered a lot of people, killed a lot of Jews, made Jerusalem virtually uninhabitable. That period of time did not last very long, though. The Ramban arrives in Jerusalem shortly after that, a few years after that. He's already an older man, towards the end of the 13th century. In the 1260s, he arrives here. Only a few years after the Tatars invaded. And he writes a letter that we have. I have it in this book. The Ramban wrote a letter to his son back in Spain. He left his family shortly after the famous disputation at Barcelona. Ramban leaves Spain, comes to Israel. And he wrote a letter home. And in the letter he says to his son, I've traveled around Israel. The land is beautiful. It's a wonderful country. I came to Jerusalem. He says, the more holy a place is, the more destroyed it is. And I came to Jerusalem. And lo and behold, I found that all the Jews who had, until very recently, lived in Jerusalem had fled. And all that remained in Jerusalem were 2 Jews. They didn't even have a mezuzah. There were 2 Jews in Jerusalem. And they're brothers. And they were in the dyeing industry, not dyeing. It's an old Jewish hobby, right? Dyeing? No, it's dyeing fabric, like making it a different color. Dyeing, D-Y-E. Okay. They were in the dyeing business, 2 brothers. So the Ramban gets to Jerusalem, and there are 2 Jews in Jerusalem. There's no minyan. So he writes in the letter, he says the whole city is destroyed. So everything's like Hefker, like there's buildings, bombed out buildings and stuff. So he said, we found a room in Yerushalayim that no one cared about. We got a few people together, we cleaned up the room, fixed it up. I sent messengers to the city of Shechem. The big Jewish communities in Israel then were Yafo, Shechem, Aza. It's kind of funny. Hebron had a community, and the Jerusalem community, and up north by Tzfat hadn't really grown up yet. There were a few Jewish communities around. He said, we sent people to Shechem to get a Sefer Torah. And I've convinced some Jews who fled to nearby areas to come back to Jerusalem, at least for Shabbos. But now we're starting to have regular minyanim in Yerushalayim. And to us now sitting in this room, I want to tell you. A few years before the Ramban got there, there had been a minyan in Yerushalayim, and there had always been one. From the time of the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. The Tatars invaded. Jerusalem hit its low point. If you were to make a graph of the Galut from the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash until today, and look for when was Jerusalem at its lowest, most destroyed point, it would be when the Ramban got there. The Ramban gets there, he finds a room, cleans it up, makes a shul, gets a Sefer Torah, gets a minyan together, and the Jewish community in Jerusalem starts to grow. And although it was very gradual and it took hundreds and hundreds of years, what we have today, ever since then there's been a minyan in Yerushalayim. Ever since then there have been Jews in Yerushalayim, the community's grown. So if you were to graph the entire thing from the Churban Beis HaMikdash to right now, 57, 70, you would say that the low point, where the arrow was no longer pointing down but started pointing up, if ever so gradually, is when the Ramban arrives in Yerushalayim. Right around the beginning of day 6. That's when he gets there. Sometime in the 1260s. That's when he got it. About 20 years after 1240, which was the year 5000. In 1260 was the Tatar invasion. He was here a few years after. Something 1267 maybe. The letter's not dated. We don't know exactly. You can figure it out by when the disputation was, because it was shortly after that. Whatever it is. The late 1260s he gets here. Now, was the Ramban right? Oh, no, and by the way, you can go to that shul. Ever been to the old city, to the Ramban shul? Ever been there? That's the room you're in, man. It's a crying shame that of many people, I know many people, I know Rabbanim who do not know this story. They do not know the Ramban's letters. They know the Ramban's papers from the Torah. They don't know his letters. And they don't know that room is the Ramban, the room that today is the Ramban shul is that churva. And what's crazy is if you go to the Ramban shul today, outside in front of the Ramban shul, they made a big plexiglass thing that has a text of the Ramban's Igeret to his son, telling him to be a good boy. The famous Igeret HaRamban, Shema B'ni Musar Avicha, that's printed in the back of the siddur. That shouldn't be what's up there. They should have this letter up there to tell everyone the importance of this room. I think, historically speaking, this is one of the major holy places in Israel. If you look around you and you see the ingathering of the exiles happening, and you see the world changing in this way, you know where it all begins? You can start wherever you want. You can start at the foundation of the State of Israel. You can start at the Zionist Congress. You can start when the Vilna Gaon's students come to Israel in the early 1800s. You can pick a starting point, but you can't pick one earlier than the Ramban getting there at the low point and building a minyan. That's really where it starts. The Ramban puts the shul together, and ever since then, we've been working on it. Slowly, we've been working on it. Now, so let's get back to our 6 days here. So we have the Ramban's obviously a critical person. So when the Ramban says we're now entering the end of days, he wasn't just saying that because he was being optimistic. He was saying that because he knew that there was some fundamental change that had happened, that we'd hit the low point and we turned the corner. He didn't know how long it would take, but he knew that now we're on the way out of the tunnel. We're still in the tunnel, but now we can say that we're no longer going deeper in, we're now on our way out. The Ramban knew that. Now, what's this 1,000 years, 24 hours? So let me tell you something cool. There's a book here, a Selech HaRav, which is a book of responsa by a Rav by the name of Rabbi Chaim David Halevi. He passed away in 1998, very recently. Okay, very recently he died. Was it 11 years ago? He passed away. And he was the chief rabbi of Tel Aviv for many years. Before that, the chief rabbi of Rishon LeZion. A great Torah scholar. He wrote many books. This is one of a 9-volume set of his responsa, and it's not his It's not even, that's not even half of what he wrote. He's a great posek and a great Kabbalist at the same time, as many Sephardic Gedolim are. And in the second tshuva of his entire set of tshuva, and this one is written in 1973, someone asked him, is it permissible to calculate the end of days? And he starts off by saying, yes, and now I'm going to do it. Okay? And he then shares with us a calculation that goes back to a Kabbalist who lived around the turn of the 20th century named Rabbi Yitzchak Alfaya. Rabbi Yitzchak Alfaya was a Jerusalem Kabbalist, a Sephardi Kabbalist, who wrote a book called Kuntra Sichi Eli, sometime 1910, 1915, a number of decades before the foundation of the State of Israel. And for many years I only knew of this book from this one quote, and then I had a neighbor who now lives in Ramat Shiloh, who now lives in Ramat Beit Shemesh, who has an amazing library, Yeshua Gerzi. He has a tremendous, tremendous library. And I asked him, do you have this book? He said, yeah, sure. And it's like this obscure Kabbalah book called Kuntra Sichi Eli that was quoted in here. So I wanted to see the text inside for myself. And this is what he writes. The Kuntra Sichi Eli, Rabbi Yitzchak Alfaya, writing, again, sometime shortly after the turn of the century. The book was published at the end of the teens. I don't know when this particular piece in the book was written, but writing way back then, around the time of World War I, let's say, Rabbi Yitzchak Alfaya writes that, and he writes that the Arizal said this. He says, he quotes a Zohar in Parshas, is it Vayera? I have it written down. Yeah, in Parshas Vayera. There's a Zohar that says that in the 6th, when we get to the 6th century of the 6th millennium, the windows of Chachma will be opened, and essentially goes on to this long flowery language about how everything's really going to start moving towards the redemption. Now, why does that make sense? It makes sense because the 6th century of the 6th millennium would be, what would be the first year of that?
1880.
No, not in secular years. What would be the first year of the 6th century of the 6th millennium? No, 5500. 5500. Okay? 5500 is halfway through. 5500 is halfway through. Is halfway through Friday. What does that mean? That if you have 24 hours, that means you have night and then day. So what's 5500? It's sunrise. Right, it's sunrise. It's sunrise Friday morning. It's when, because even on every day starts with a dark period. Let's think darkness and light. Let's put our poetic hats on for a second. The dark period is the first 500 years of that. So there's progress, but it's hidden. Who lives in the year 5500? Who's the prominent Gadol Hador right around then? The Gaon of Vilna. The Gaon of Vilna says to his students, and this is in Kol HaTorah, this is in a book written in the early 1800s. He says to his students, the sun is rising, it's Friday morning. Shabbos is coming. It's time to go back. And the reason that ever since you guys got to Israel, you've been hearing all about, like in your davening, oh, the Gra says this, the Gra says this, the Gra says... How many times have you heard about minhagim of the Gra? Because in Israel, there's a lot of minhagim of the Gra. Why? Because the Ashkenazi community in Israel was founded by students of the Vilna Gaon. Why did they come here? Because he told them, it's Friday morning, Mashiach's, this is the home stretch. This is the second half of that 24-hour period, which is the 6th day, which means that it's Neitzach Hama, it's sunrise on Friday. It's time to get ready for Shabbos. The big Shabbos. Go back. So they come, and they found the community. And this is long before the secular Zionist movement even existed. This is the roots of religious Zionism, by the way. All the Rav Kookniks and everything, it all goes back. It's all built on this material. Okay? What I'm telling you. It's a different sheer. So the Vilna Gaon says to his students, it's the sunrise. Now, Rabbi Yitzchak Alfaya, and apparently the Arizal said the same thing. Rabbi Yitzchak Alfaya, writing about 100 years after the students of the Vilna Gaon come around, beginning of the 1900s, writes, he says, well, let's do a calculation. And he quotes another Zohar that says, Be'ita achishana, be'et hey, in the 5th hour, the 5th time. So he says, this refers, he was a Kabbalist, I don't know where he got this from, but I saw it in print. He said, this refers to the fact that on that Friday, the 5th hour is when the main change in the Geula process is going to happen. When it gets to the 5-hour mark. Be'et, hey, be'ita, bet ayin taf, hey, be'ita, at its time, he says, read it, be'et, hey. So, Rav Yitzchak Faya writes, and I saw this in this book that was printed a long, long time ago. I saw the numbers there, and I looked at it, and my eyes bugged out. He says, well, if you figure it out, if you start from 5,500 and you count 5 41-year and 8-month periods, and you go forward like that, 41 years and 8 months, and 41 years and 8 months, and 41 years and 8 months, and 41 years and 8 months, you get to the spring of the year 5708, otherwise known as 1948. If you calculate it to the day, he was off by about 8 weeks. Talking about a calculation that's like a 1,000-year calculation, and he was off from the founding of the State of Israel by about 8 weeks. Yeah, or the founding of the State of Israel was off from him by 8 weeks. But basically, that's pretty accurate. So, and he's writing this long before. He's like, oh, so it'll be in 5708, something major will happen, it'll be a big step towards the Geula.
Today.
What?
8 weeks.
He didn't say it was 8 weeks.
No, he said
Yeah, I figured it out once. It came out, his came out like the end of, it comes out like Shvat. And this was actually Iyar. Right, so Shvat, Adar, Nisan, Iyar. It's like, because it's Hey Iyar, which is the beginning of Iyar. So it's about 8 weeks.
Shevet. Come Shevet.
Yeah, Come Shevet, Shvat, I don't know. Whatever. I don't know. Okay? So now, this is what Rav Faya writes. And then he writes, right after that, I saw all this originally in the Seichel. That's why I mentioned it. I just wanted to give credit to Rav Chaim David Alevi. Chaim David Alevi wrote this tshuva in 1973. He mentions this. So I read that and I was like, wow, this guy nailed it. And it actually fits with all the numbers. Like the Grut said about these numbers, and here's this Zohar that says Be'et A, and this other Zohar that says that things really start at 5,500, and that's where you count from. And you put it all together, and the Arizal said it, and all these guys a long time ago, and the calculation works out, boom, 1948 springtime. Okay. So then Rav Yitzchak Faya says, the next big step in the Geula process is Chatzot. Is the 6th hour, right? Because, and he writes, the language he uses, let me read his language. His language is, Ikar Gilui Kedushat HaShabbat Mechatzot Yom HaShishi. The main revelation of the holiness of Shabbat is from Chatzot. On Friday. That from Chatzot on Friday is when you really feel the holiness of Shabbos. And therefore, when we get to the next 41-year and 8-month mark, that's going to be even more. Now, he wrote that in the 19-teens. Rav Chaim David Alevi quoted it in 1973. I was reading this in about the year 2002. The next 41-year and 8-month mark is 1990. So I'm thinking, when I read this, I'm thinking, okay, wait a second. 1990 was a big year historically for the world and for the Jews. It really was. The Soviet Union collapsed, which meant that Soviet Jewry was now allowed to leave, and the Kibbutz Galiot the ingathering of the exiles was really allowed to continue in a great way, in earnest. Fine. But, I'm sorry. I don't like having the wool pulled over my eyes, and I don't like being convinced of something that doesn't make sense. And there's no way that is as big a step in the redemption process as the founding of the State of Israel. There's no way that the fall of the Soviet Union and the Soviet Jews being able to get out matches, in terms of fundamental changes in the status of the Jewish people in the redemption process, the founding of the state. So if you're going to give me like the next big step, I'm not so I'm not convinced. But then something else also occurred to me that really bothered me about the statement, which is, he says that the fundamental holiness of Shabbos is felt already on Friday from Chatzot. Now, could you think of a halacha that exists on Friday that is impacted by the fact that Shabbos is coming?
can't eat.
Can't eat. You're not supposed to sit down for a real meal.
You're not supposed to travel.
No haircut. What else?
You can't travel after, so you're not supposed to travel.
You can travel for Shabbos, right? But
You're not supposed to carry meat.
okay, but that's like in the Mishnah you have that stuff, right? You have all these halachas. What's a big one? When we daven mincha, We don't say Tachanun. Not Mincha on Friday, you don't say Tachanun, right? Why? Because it's Friday. Because Shabbos is coming. So obviously, now, you say Tachanun and Shachris on Friday. So the Kedushat HaShabbat hasn't affected Shachris, but it does affect Mincha. Right, which means there's something happened on Friday as we crossed into Mincha territory. So I quickly went and I got a Mishnah Brura. Is there a Mishnah Brura Chelek Gimel here?
Yeah.
Chelek Gimel. Here we go. Perfect. Now this is good. It's a big one. Now, I quickly ran. I got a Mishnah Brura. I got a Shulchan Aruch, and what I was bothered by was the way the halacha is worded. This halacha of Erev Shabbat. No. It's coming. Here we go. Says you're not supposed to set up a meal. That's already from the 9th hour. It's only in the second half of the afternoon. And here we go. Siman Reish Nun Aleph in the Shulchan Aruch. The title of it is Shelo La'asot Melacha Be'erev Shabbat Min HaMincha Ulamam. From Mincha and onward. Sif Aleph. Ha'osem Melacha Be'erev Shabbat Min HaMincha Ulamala Eino Re'eh Siman Bracha. Now, so wait a second. You can't daven mincha at chatzot. What's the earliest time you can daven mincha? Half an hour after chatzot. And all the halachot about not doing malacha on Erev Shabbat, all the things we were just talking about, they're not. It doesn't say in the Shulchan Aruch from chatzot. It doesn't say in the Gemara from chatzot. It says min ha-mincha. If it meant from chatzot, it would have said. In fact, the truth is it's a machlokes, and we paskin min mincha. Maybe the Kabbalists hold that it's from chatzot. I don't know, but the halacha says min mincha. So I said to myself, you know what? Saying that the kedusha of Shabbos is felt in the week, that the kedusha of Shabbos spills over into the week and has some effect on our lives, is actually true in a practical way, not from chatzot. It's true from a half an hour after chatzot. You know what I'm saying? So, if 1990 was chatzot, we should now do a half hour. What's a half hour? 20 years and 10 months. Okay? That comes out to, and I'm much more spooked by this now than I was when I first came up with this calculation. I did this calculation in 2002. It comes out to this coming summer, Chodesh Av, of the year 5707. I don't know if anything's going to happen there. As I said at the beginning of this year, Divrei Shema ve'efshar. These are words of maybe and perhaps. I have no idea. But something big happened in 1990, true. But if we're going to talk about Kedushat HaShabbat coming, we are in the middle of exciting times. Now, I want to bring things down to earth a little bit, okay, and get us ready for Rosh Hashanah with this. Listen. Okay, if you've been spacing out, the old timers will laugh. If you've lost concentration, you've been spacing out, now's a good time to get back in, focus on the next little piece. We have 5 minutes left in this year. Okay, focus in. What does Geula mean? What does redemption mean? Does it mean that, yay, we won, the Jews won? Yay! Like we crossed the finish line? What does Geula really mean? I want you to open your minds and think more broadly. Geula means that the entire world accepts God, and God's morality, and the truth, right? That's what redemption really is. Like Rashi says on the pasuk, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. What does Rashi say on the pasuk? Hashem Elokeinu. Right now, meaning when Moshe is saying it 3,000 years ago, he's only our God. No one else believes in him. In the future, Hashem Echad, everyone's going to believe in him. That's redemption. If you look at the end of Sefer Malachi, the last nevuah ever given, third parak of Sefer Malachi, Malachi talks about how the whole world will be on the same page and everyone will recognize God, and God's truth will fill the world. Like the sea covers, like the sea is covered by water. Very nice. That's what redemption is. Redemption is everybody agrees with the moral principles of God. That's true redemption. The Jewish people returning to the land of Israel and making their home here and building the Beit HaMikdash is all that's an engine that drives the process, and that's a critical component of it. But that's not the real definition of it. The definition of it is what we call world peace. World peace is the result of redemption. The result of the redemption. Listen to what I'm saying. World peace is the result of redemption. If everyone agrees, and everyone has the same concepts of morality, and everyone believes in God, so no one's going to fight. World peace is the result of everyone agreeing. Now, is that far-fetched, that the whole world's going to agree?
Why are you angry? No. Your face full.
Let me tell you how I see the world. Maybe I'm crazy, but let me tell you how I see things. And I want to share with you, I hope that you'll agree with me. When Hosni Mubarak, the dictator of Egypt, talks to, I don't know, the Prime Minister of England. The two of them come from very different backgrounds. They grew up reading different books. They grew up listening to different music. They grew up watching different things on television. They're both people who are older. Hosni Mubarak's over 80. I don't know how old the current Prime Minister of England is. He's not a kid. Right? These people, they come from different cultures. Hosni Mubarak's grandchildren probably listen to the same music as the Prime Minister of England's grandchildren. Probably watches the same TV shows. Probably sees the same news clips on television every night. Probably reads the same books. Probably both read Harry Potter. I'm serious. It sounds like silliness. Let me put it in a couple different analogies. On September 11th, when those planes hit the World Trade Center, people had gut reactions. People heard about it. Most people in the Western world, regardless of religion, most people in the Western world, in any normal Western country, were like shocked. And everyone heard about it that day, right? Anyone living in any Western country that has television or internet or anything knew about it immediately. And they all had a reaction. People reacted. Shock. Horror. There were other countries in the world. There were other countries in the world where people danced. There were. There were Arab countries where people were dancing and celebrating, throwing candies. Now, where do those reactions come from? These are not intellectual reactions. These are emotional reactions. What builds a person's reaction to an event? Because most Western people, Democrats, Republicans, right? Like, most Western people all kind of like had the same gut reaction of this like horror. How come they weren't suddenly dancing? Like what? How does the reaction get built? Well, these types of reactions get built through a culture, through a shared culture, the way you're raised and all the messages you've taken over the course of your life and all the information you take in and all the things you're taught and the culture you live in creates a certain headspace of how you react to an event. Now, before mass communication, forget about reacting to an event, you wouldn't have even heard about it. For a tragedy that happened in one part of the world to be heard about in the other part, like until the ships came and people brought, the scrolls with the information or the homing pigeons flew over, no one even knew about anything happening in another part of the world. It took months or years to even know about events in other parts of the world. We live in a day and age where the entire world experiences the day's news together. Through the internet, through television, the whole world actually, everyone, like a huge percentage of the Earth's population is aware of major world events on the day that they take place and probably sees the exact same clip of them. And in a lot of parts of the world with the same anchorman, like CNN International is everywhere. Right? Like, so the whole world, or like Yahoo News, the whole world is experiencing, when you live in the States, the United States particularly, you tend to think of Yahoo as being in the United States. You don't realize that the entire world is reading Yahoo News. Okay, like the whole world is experiencing and sharing information with each other and experiencing the world together. Now, when I first got married, my wife and I lived in Yerushalayim, and we rented an apartment, and in the apartment was this old junky television. And the landlord said to us, "Yeah, you can keep it." And we're like, "Okay." We didn't, we lived in a previous apartment for the first 10 months we were married. We didn't have a TV. We don't have a TV now. Just so for the short period of time, for the period of time between when we moved in there and it died, which was a few months later, we had a television. It's the only time we had a television. We didn't get rid of it for religious reasons. We got rid of it. Well, we were happy at that. We didn't get a new one. It was more for the fact that we had wasted a lot of time and we weren't getting enough sleep, so we were happy it was gone. But we enjoyed having a TV while we had it. And we got this channel, it was like 6 months, where we used to watch this. It was this music video channel that was broadcast out of like Bombay or Singapore or something like that. Okay, it was the Star Network. And it was this very cheesy, very low budget thing. And this is back in 1997. Okay. And they only had one set, and there was like this one VJ who was sort of like this like faux MTV VJ, but he had sort of an Indian accent, but he was cool also, like sort of quasi cool with gelled hair. It was really weird. But we used to watch this thing, and it was hilarious. We'd watch this music video channel, and what fascinated my wife and I about this channel was that it was like a takeoff on MTV, but it was real, meaning that little girls, like 12-year-old girls from Pakistan and from Thailand and from India and from all over Asia and the Arab world were like mailing in their little requests with hearts on them for a Backstreet Boys song, and like it was the same stuff and the same videos. And when people would call in and they had something like TRL, and it was all, you think about the fact that like 12-year-old girls all over the world had posters of the same pop stars in their lockers. That seems pretty silly, but those kids are all reading Harry Potter. Harry Potter's been translated into every language. I once opened a magazine. It was actually Us magazine. I once opened an Us magazine. This is many years ago when Harry Potter, like the third Harry Potter came out, the fourth one came out. And I opened it up, and there was a spread, which was like in honor of the release of the new Harry Potter book, and it had pictures that were taken at Harry Potter opening sales in about 20 different countries in the world. So you had a bunch of little Japanese kids dressed in their Harry Potter clothes at the Harry Potter opening book sale, and you had kids in Russia and kids in this part of Africa, this part of Europe, all over the world. And I'm looking at it going, wow, they're all reading the same book. Now think of what's going to happen. Let's project forward 50 years. 50 years from now, when you have two 65-year-old world leaders who are talking to each other, they grew up reading the same books, getting all the same news clips, watching all the same TV shows, watching all the same movies, looking at all the same internet sites. They grew up in the same culture. Think about that. Their natural reactions to world events are going to be a lot more similar. The natural reactions, like Ariel Sharon, if he wasn't in a coma, he's in his 80s. Imagine him and Hosni Mubarak. They grew up a 6-hour drive from each other in Cairo and Beersheba, but they grew up in totally different worlds. Their grandchildren, same world. So if you think about it, who cares? Or like sports fans. Sports fans all over the world now are all aware of, like when the cricket scores. All the famous athletes that are famous worldwide. Think about it. The culture is so much more similar worldwide that it's inevitable. There's still a lot of differences, and who cares? I don't care if the whole world shares in the same anti-Semitic idea. That doesn't matter. The content of what people are believing is less important. The more alike everyone's thinking is, and the more ability there is for everyone to find out the information at the same time, that means that the table is set. So that I remember hearing as a kid, this midrash that you probably heard it when you were a kid, that when Mashiach comes, there's going to be a shofar blown, the whole world's going to hear it. You ever hear that? What does that mean? What does that mean? The whole world's going to hear it. The whole world couldn't hear anything until recently, but now it makes perfect sense to us. That could happen easily. Some major event happens, the whole world's aware of it, almost instantaneously. Sure, that happens all the time. That's not so crazy. So now think about it. If a huge percentage of the Earth's population is being raised with the same messages, even if it's all the same stupid, immoral hip-hop videos, I don't care what it is. As long as everyone gets on the same page, then as these people grow up, and as events start to happen, some series of events that God has in mind for us, and the whole world goes together, and laughs together, and cries together, and is horrified at the same time. There's room for the entire world to all somehow have the entire world's opinion could actually move all in the same direction. That couldn't happen before mass communication. So when you look around you and you say, wow, after 2,000 years, there are millions of Jews living in an independent Jewish homeland. At the same time period as mass communication has been developed, that's not a coincidence. That's not a coincidence. The foundation of the State of Israel and the ingathering of the Jewish exiles at the same time as other aspects of the redemptive process for the world are also being put into place makes perfect sense. Believing that the whole world is one day all going to agree on one moral system is not even a religious belief anymore. It's a fact. It's gonna happen. We're moving in that direction. Everyone's opinions are becoming more and more similar. It's a train you cannot stop. The question is, what will eventually be the content of that morality? Okay, if the content of that morality is God and truth, game over. It's not so far-fetched. How long is it going to take? I don't know.
I want to like it's a joke.
But one of my goals tonight is that when we say, oh yeah, one day Mashiach's going to come, and it's sort of like this fantasy, like, it shouldn't be such a fantasy. The other thing is to look around us. If you took a Jew, took a Jew from 1,000 years or 500 years ago, from anywhere in the world, and like transported him through time and dropped him down in Israel, and you gave him a tour, and you showed him Ramat Beit Shemesh and Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, and just drove him around the country in traffic jams with zillions of people everywhere, and Jewish soldiers, and then now go try to convince that guy that this isn't the Geula. What are you going to tell him? That this isn't the ingathering of the exiles at the end of days.
I take him to Ramallah.
What?
I take him to Ramallah.
No, he would say that's a detail. And so it's not finished yet. Great. So it's not finished yet. Oh, what are you gonna say? Well, but you know the people in the government aren't frum. So? Okay, fine. You got to work some stuff out. But come on, look around you, man. There's a lot of, as irrational as it sounds, we got a weird religion. We put on tefillin. Weird as that. There's all kinds of crazy stuff. We believe in all sorts of crazy things. But you know what? Reality is turning out the way these crazy ideas said it would. And we're in the middle of it, and there's a concept Chazal say, Ein ba'al hanes makir b'niso. A person experiencing a miracle is the last person to notice it. We're like, yeah, it's totally normal that a bunch of people who don't even believe in God or the Torah give their lives to live in the land of Israel. It makes any sense? It makes any sense that this is all happening at the same time and that we're here? Does it make any sense historically? We're just like, it's the world you were born and raised in, so we think it's normal. It's the most abnormal thing on earth. We're living through miracles. And to top it all off, the calculations work out. So we're part of something big. And what's the message? The message is we're part of something big, and you live in an important time. And your generation is going to be leading the world. When you reach the age of leadership, you're going to be leading a world that is really on the verge. And just appreciate what you're involved in. When you're like playing backgammon online and there's some guy in Turkey who you're playing with, you're talking to him, you have a chance to communicate with someone. I'm not saying try to be makar of the person, but understand just the enormity of that. The whole world is communicating. And that means that ultimately the whole world is going to be on the same page. And Bayomahu, Yeh Hashem Echad, Ushmo Echad. Everyone's going to believe the same thing. That's it. Guys, remember at 12:30, everyone has to be in the base measure for 5 minutes. 5 minutes.
Is it possible to get a lot of sound file off that? Is it possible to get that sound file off without recording through the speakers?
Basically, Mashiach is second trap.